Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the City Council meeting of June 1st, 2015. If you'd stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, and if we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Altough.
Here.
Councilmember Ellison.
Here.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Mayer.
Here.
And Mayor Hodges.
Here. Approval of the agenda is provided to us. Any changes there?
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Mr. Altough gets that one. Thank you. Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? Third item is approval of minutes of our previous meetings, and the minute will attack the first one of May 18, our regular council meeting. Any additions or corrections to those minutes?
I move that we approve the May 18 minutes as presented.
I will second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 18th, regular meeting of the City Council. All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? Item 2 would be the closed session of May 18. Those closed minutes were circulated. Any additions or corrections to those?
I will move for approval of the minutes of May 18 closed session.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the May 18 closed session minutes. All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? Also included was the work session of May 26. Any additions, corrections to those?
I will move for approval of the work session minutes of May 26.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the May 26 work session. All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on then to accounts payable. Again, those were provided to us ahead of time. Any concerns or questions with the accounts payable?
I move that we approve the accounts payable as presented.
I will second.
Been moved and seconded to adopt the accounts payable, and for this we need a roll call.
Councilmember Altough.
Yes.
Councilmember Ellison.
Yes.
Councilmember Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Mayer.
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges.
Yes. Thank you. Item 5 is citizen comments for any of the items that do not appear on the agenda. So if any citizen would like to address the council, this would be the time to do so. We'd ask that you state your name and limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Tony Ellison, North Division in Lowell. I realize this is not a question and answer period, but it comes in the form of a question to Councilmember Altough, voting no on the budget last week, or last session, and I was just wondering why the no vote. Were you unhappy with the whole budget? Was there a part of the budget you didn't like, or something that somebody overlooked?
Mr. Ellison, all due respect, this is comments and not a question.
I understand. I'm done.
Mr. Altough does not need to respond.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I took the liberty of printing this out rather than spend all evening with you folks here tonight.
And your name, Mr. Soul, is?
I'll get to that. Honorable Mayor, council members, city manager, and attendees here, good evening. My name is Jim Soul, and I live in beautiful Virgins Township. I have a short comment. Short meaning I wrote it down. Okay. First, I would like to say that I support the city council. Right up front. You folks have been courageous, vigilant, and honest. You have served with integrity and faithfully represent the majority of the city citizens. To use a word that I have read frequently in the local paper, you have truly been noble servants. I love that word, servants. I also wholeheartedly support the city manager. I worked with Mark for 2 years as the airport manager, and I found him to be congenial, supportive, and available. We had on occasion difference of opinion, but he was always willing to let me do my job. I accept the fact that the city council can never please everyone. You were elected to receive civic input and make the best decisions in the interests of the city. I believe the city hired the best applicant for the job of city manager. Since taking the job, Mr. Howe has eliminated the projected $500,000 deficit. That's a big dollar. He saved the city more than $800,000 by refinancing the previous debt. During his tenure as city manager, he has nearly doubled the general fund balance. I would consider these, amongst many others, as significant achievements and indicative of excellent management. Unfortunately, Mr. Howe was also caught in the position of having to deal with employees organizing a union and negotiating the very first contract. This contract obviously will set a baseline for all future contracts. With all the great work Mr. Howe was doing, he found himself immersed in the contentious atmosphere that surrounds most union negotiations. Not being a person who only likes to present problems, I would also like to offer a solution. I haven't named the problem, really. Mr. Howe should immediately be offered a contract extension with a substantial raise as a thank you for his excellent work. Since I may be getting near my 5-minute limit, which is a good rule, by the way, I do not expect you to call an emergency work session this evening to act on my suggestion. But I would appreciate, however, your thoughtful consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
I gotta run.
Anyone else care to address the council?
Hey, I am back. Brian Van Veen, water plant superintendent. We did it again. Won another taste off from the AWWA. We've entered it 4 times. We've won 3. So we're going to the states again, and in September. And I just wanted to thank all the guys that work in the water department, Ralph Brecken, Todd Phillips, and Jeff Van Senders. Without them, we wouldn't have this. So I just wanted to thank them. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Brian. And congratulations, and we're very proud of you and this community.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to address the council this evening? Seeing none, then we'll move on to old business, and we've got several items there, so we'll start with strategic goals.
Nothing new on strategic goals. but recall our discussion at the workshop. Eventually, we're going to see this turn into those tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 goals for the new year that we're entering. So if this isn't the last time you see this report, your next meeting will be the last time. So it's in the strategic goals. Pending council, nothing new on pending council projects report. We did receive, at least on downtown tower, we did receive one bid today. I don't know if we received a second one or not. We were expecting it. And frankly, I didn't get a chance to look before I came up here to see if we got the second one. We'll open those tomorrow and we expect to have a recommendation for your next meeting. So,
All right.
and that's it, Mr. White.
Okay. Item C is the library heating and cooling system project and or issues. You've got something for us?
Yes, I do. Since your last meeting, Ron Woods, our interim DPW director, who apologizes for not being here tonight, he had a pre-scheduled some time off before he became the interim director, and we said he could go ahead and do that. He didn't have to cancel his plans. But he spent some time taking another look at the system, put together a memo for you, presented that at the workshop, and that memo is also included in your packet tonight. Basically, he says that he's not convinced that a total redesign of the system is warranted at this time. The failure that is occurring right now at the library is of the main compressing unit and cooling coil. He says that after 15 years, that's not unheard of, depending on many factors, including load and usage. That particular unit cools 60% of the building that gets most of the usage during the cooling season. The changes include replacement of the entire system or that unit with the new, more efficient indoor and outdoor components. However, there are some future changes to the system that we want to look at in addition to this, but what we'd like to do is get moving at least and get this cooling system replaced so that as we get into the season when it's needed, then we can have that part of the project completed. But the other two things that he's mentioned that need to be looked at are replacement of the thermostats. They're outdated, and that along with the control system needs to be looked at. And also some circulation pump and valving changes to the passive baseboard heating system. That needs to be looked at. He spent some time talking with the director of the library, the branch director, and gotten some feedback from them. He basically will put it in the sense of the bones of the system are really in pretty good shape, and the basic design of the system is pretty good, but there are some things that just need to be tweaked, and of course the first is just replacing this cooling unit. We have 3 bids to do that. They are from Siemens Mechanical, Progressive Heating and Cooling, and Canfield Plumbing, and we are recommending that you accept the low bid from Siemens Mechanical that does have some experience with the system and working with this. And that low bid of $18,000 to replace this cooling unit. And then the other items we will be bringing back to you in the future.
All right, that's it. Thank you. Any council comments or concerns?
No. Not as long as it's got a guarantee.
Guaranteed until it breaks.
Yeah.
I move that we accept the bid from Siemens Heating and Cooling.
Okay.
Siemens Mechanical, I'm sorry, is the official title.
For $18,000.
For $18,000.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay. Been moved and seconded.
Give it to Matt.
Give it to Matt, all right, that's on the record. Yeah, but nonetheless, we do have a second, however that came about. Motion and seconded to accept the bid from Siemens Mechanical for $18,000. And for this, maybe a roll call would be in order.
Councilmember Altough?
Yes.
Councilmember Ellison?
Yes.
Councilmember Hall?
Yes.
Councilmember Mayer?
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to item 7. It's the Zoning Board of Appeals, so I would suspend the council meeting and convene the Zoning Board of Appeals. And Mark, you've got a little lead-in for this.
Yes, I do. We've received a variance request for a proposed sign at O'Reilly's Auto Parts. I've attached a couple of memos that are from Andy Moore with Williams and Works. Andy Moore serves as our planning consultant, and I guess I would, so if you would turn it over to Andy and let him walk through the details of this request.
Thanks, Mark. This request is from, as Mark said, O'Reilly Auto Parts. They are seeking a variance to increase the area of the wall sign, which is located on the front of their building at 1427 West Main. Currently, the zoning ordinance prescribes a maximum area of 50 square feet, and the applicant is requesting an increase of up to about 100 square feet. Within the zoning ordinance, there are 6 standards that would need to be met by the variance in order for the variance to be approved, and I'll summarize those standards now, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor Hodges, when I'm done, and we can hear from the applicant. The first standard is that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances that apply only to this property in question in circumstances that generally don't apply to other similar properties within that zoning district. The second standard is that the condition or the situation for which a variance is being sought is not so general or recurrent of a nature that it wouldn't be more prudent to simply amend the zoning ordinance to address it. The third standard is that variance is necessary for the applicant to enjoy a property right that is enjoyed by others within that same area. The fourth standard is that the variance would not be significantly detrimental to adjacent property in the surrounding neighborhood. The fifth standard is that the variance would not impair the intent and purpose of the ordinance. And the sixth standard is that the immediate practical difficulty that caused the need for the variance was not created by any action of the applicant. So those are the standards. All of those standards have to be met in order for the variance to be approved. So I guess I would stress that it's not if one or two or three of them are met. If every single one is met, then the variance can be approved. And if even one of those is not met, then the variance should be denied. So Mayor Hodges, I'll turn it back over to you at this point.
Thank you for that report, Andy, and your work on that. And he created a report for us, and I assume O'Reilly's has also gotten a copy of that. We will open the public hearing and allow O'Reilly's to speak first, and then we'll hear from the public. And then if there's a follow-up, O'Reilly's is welcome to do that too. So if you just state your name for the record, sir, that would be terrific.
My name is Rob Connor. I'm the district manager for the O'Reilly Auto Parts in the area. I appreciate your time this evening. The main purpose for this is we have such a unique setback from the road. We are very shaded by some very large trees in front of our building. Basically what we're trying to do is cause the traffic to slow down a little bit and not create such a sudden stop in front of our building. If you've had the privilege of being in one of my stores, you will notice that we don't necessarily have a lot of greenery in front of lots of our stores. So we have a very low sign, very low to the road, very small sign on the front of the building. And all we're trying to do is just increase that visibility so we don't get those sudden stops when people have to drive past our building or create a backup really quickly. So that's the purpose of increasing this sign. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any public wish to make a comment at this time? Seeing none, there was one letter, I understand, that was sent. So we should probably have that read into the record, so if you would do that.
To the Lowell City Council, zoning rules are put in effect to limit what businesses or individuals can do within the best interest of the community. Giving a variance in some case does no harm and gives no advantage to the entity requesting it. In this case, it would give an unfair advertising advantage to a business that was not needed in the community to begin with. I would strongly advise against this variance as it could be construed as preferential treatment. Kirk S. Collins, Shogo Automotive Supply.
All right, thank you. And once again, any other public comment, or Rob, would you like to make any further comments?
I would actually, just one.
All right.
The beauty of our business is we create competition. We're not in to run anyone out of town. We're just here to be an option for everyone. You know, it's not trying to bully our way into town. We're just trying to help this city out, this beautiful city out, and you know, we took a piece of property and made a very beautiful piece of property out of it. And we're very proud of our product. And again, we're just here to be an option. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And we'll close the public hearing and come back to the council for any council comments or questions that we may have for either Mark or Andy.
I got a question before we start. In 2013, we reread the ordinance. Did we change that part of the ordinance at all after when we reread that?
I'm not familiar with what
The size of the sign.
All right, maybe Andy.
Yeah,
I was talking to Jim.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
that's appropriate. Thank you.
In August 2013, when the amendment to the zoning ordinance was approved, it was a fairly comprehensive revision to that entire chapter of the ordinance pertaining to signs. With regard to this specific request, yes, there was a change to that specific standard that deals with the maximum area of a wall sign in the C3 district. Under the terms of the old ordinance, I believe the standard was simply that the maximum area could be 20% of the whole wall area. And under the new standard, it's 20% or 50 square feet, whichever is less.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it.
Any other council concerns? Okay.
I know that where I work, it's next door to there, we wanted to change our sign for years. And we just don't want to have to deal with changing the variance or anything. It was just too much of a headache. It isn't really going to make any difference, and besides cost as well. We've opted not to do it. And it's, you know, they're not going to know where, you know, I guess where the hardware is at. Everybody knows where it's at. And by how many people have asked, what's going in next door? Everybody knows where O'Reilly Auto Parts is at. My personal opinion, that is right now.
And it's nothing against your business. We have an ordinance in place. It doesn't meet the criteria. Therefore, I think that we should, I make a motion that we deny the variance. Nothing against the business. We're following our rules that we set.
Mayor, if I could, before you consider that motion.
We have a motion, we need a second, and then we can have a conversation, so.
I would make a suggestion, though, that
You
before,
want to withdraw your motion?
I'll withdraw my motion.
that you receive the full report from your
Yeah, thank you.
planning, so before you make a motion.
Okay. Andy, you have a summary or
Sure.
follow up on the report?
Yeah, I provided a memo to the Board of Zoning Appeals dated May 22nd that summarizes the request, and then it analyzes each of those standards that I mentioned previously. So I guess I'll just kind of go through that and summarize what I found for you guys, and then you can continue deliberations if you're so inclined. I think you guys are all aware of this. There is a little background with this application. O'Reilly's first came and applied in 2011 to construct a store in the city. It was ultimately approved in 2012, I believe, but at that point the building was never constructed. So your ordinance states that if a building is not constructed within a year of receiving site plan approval, then that site plan approval goes away. After that happened in August 2013 is when, as I mentioned previously, that sign ordinance was approved by City Council. And then the following year, in early 2014, O'Reilly Auto Parts came back with a new site plan, submitted it to the Planning Commission. It was approved in March of 2014. In the summer and fall of 2014, we reviewed several different applications for signs from O'Reilly's. We ultimately ended up approving a ground sign that was 48 square feet and a wall sign that was just under 50 square feet. Those were both approved, and before they were, or maybe it was after, but I know in early 2015, O'Reilly's also asked to move the location of a couple of trees that they contended would have been blocking the visibility of the ground sign. They were permitted to do that administratively because the ordinance allows us to do that. And they also compensated for taking out those 2 trees by replacing them with some landscaping elsewhere on the site. And then both of those signs were constructed in December or maybe January of December 2014, January 2015. With regard to those specific review standards, we did go through each of those standards in the zoning ordinance, and we did do some research. And again, I'll just sort of summarize each of those standards for you, and then what we found as it relates to this request. The first standard, again, is that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to this property that do not generally apply to properties in the same district. We did a brief review looking at areas and other commercial properties, areas of those parcels themselves, to see if maybe there was a unique shape, a unique condition on that property that somehow wasn't that made it unique and that might make that variance request justified. There are a number of other properties that have a very similar area and dimension, including properties at 1401 West Main, 1300 West Main, 2001 West Main, 2186 West Main. The property itself is relatively flat. We're not aware of any unique natural features or anything like that. And I don't think there's anything on that property that would preclude them from complying with the ordinance as it's written now. So, in my opinion, I did not find that standard was met. Second one is that is the one that pertains to whether or not the condition or situation is so current or is so general or of a recurrent nature to make a general regulation reasonably practical. In other words, should we just amend the ordinance to deal with this? And my response to that is if the board feels that that the sign should be larger, then the right thing to do would be to ask the planning commission to review those sign standards and ultimately consider making them larger instead of just granting an exception in this case or granting a variance. So in my opinion, a general regulation would be practical, and therefore I don't think that standard is met either. The third standard is that if the variance is necessary for the enjoyment of a substantial property right that is also possessed by other properties in that same district. Everyone in that C3 district has the same standards as far as the sign, both wall signs, ground signs, and any other kind of sign for that matter. There have been a few applicants that have come in recently after that new sign ordinance was adopted, and we have made them comply. I think O'Reilly is maybe in a little bit of a unique position here that they're one of the first brand new construction from the ground up sorts of buildings that have been constructed since that ordinance was adopted. But again, everyone at this point has got the same property rights, and if someone comes in tomorrow to build up a new building, they would have the exact same standards as O'Reilly's does with regard to their signage. Number 4, if the variance would be significantly detrimental to the adjacent property, I believe that the variance request does meet that standard. I think if you had a larger sign, I don't foresee it really harming or having any sort of significant detrimental impact to adjacent properties. So I do think that standard is met. Number 5, that the variance will not impair the intent and purpose of the ordinance. In the application materials, O'Reilly suggested that it wouldn't, and I strongly disagree with that. I believe that when you grant a variance, it sets a precedent. So if this variance were granted, then anyone else who comes in wanting a bigger sign, you would have to grant it over and over and over again. And in that case, again, you might as well just amend the ordinance to take care of it. Similarly, as far as the sign ordinance specifically goes, it says that it's intended to protect all zoning districts from visual chaos and clutter, eliminate distractions, hazards to motorists, protect uses from excessive signage. Again, that was language that was written by the Planning Commission. I know they spent a long time researching and writing that specific chapter of the zoning ordinance, and granting a variance, I believe, would significantly undermine all that work that they did. And then lastly, it also says that the purpose is of that sign ordinance is to provide the ability for the public to identify premises and establishments. That's true, and I believe the signage that O'Reilly's has on the buildings now, which complies with the ordinance, pretty easily allows motorists to identify the building and the premises pretty clearly. I've been by the site numerous times. I never had a hard time seeing it. So I don't believe that standard is met either. And then the final standard is that the immediate practical difficulty causing the need for the variance was not created by any action of applicant. One of the things noted in the application materials was that they indicated that because the building was required to be 91 feet off the road, that a larger sign was therefore needed. I did go back and look through all of our files. I couldn't find anything from us or from the city that required them to place their building 90 feet from the road. They could have constructed it 30 feet from the road if they were so inclined. That's what the minimum setback is in that area. And that may have lessened the need for a variance, but they opted to place it where they did. And so again, in my opinion, that would constitute a self-created sort of hardship. And so that's the last standard, and I don't think that standard is met. So I guess to summarize, again, in order to grant a variance, the board would have to find that all 6 standards are met. In this case, I believe that the O'Reilly Auto Parts application meets only one of those standards. And so my recommendation is for the board to deny the request.
Thank you, Andy. Any other comments from the council?
Therefore, based on the report from our planning consultant, does not meet the variance standards. Therefore, I move that we deny the request.
Second?
Moved and seconded to deny the request, and for this, maybe roll call.
Councilmember Alcott.
To deny.
Yes, to deny.
Councilmember Ellison.
Yes.
Councilmember Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Mayer.
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges.
Yes. Moving on then to item B, update on the FOIA procedures and guidelines. And again, FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. Okay. I have to explain that to folks that, yes. Anyway, Mr. Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. There is a draft, it's called Procedures and Guidelines, I think just because that's what the act refers to. But there was a change in
Excuse me, a point of order, Mr. Howe. We need to close the, thank you, we need to close the Zoning Board of Appeals and reconvene the City Council meeting, as you were saying.
Is that
That's official.
That's,
Yes, I'll make the motion. I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for that, because they are a appointed board, and they spent quite a bit of time on that sign ordinance, and I just want to let Jim know to tell them that they're doing a good job. So, thank you.
Thank you, I'll pass that on.
Okay.
So now we're closed.
Go ahead.
Now you're on the next
We're back, yeah.
Now I'm talking to the City Council, instead of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Please do.
Thank you. The legislature adopted some changes to the Freedom of Information Act, and among those changes are that we need to adopt very specific procedures and guidelines. And those procedures, a draft of those procedures and guidelines are included in your packet for review right now, but then these would need to be adopted before July 1st. In the draft, I'm just going to outline a few highlights for you. We designate the police chief as the FOIA coordinator for the city. There will be a detailed itemization of cost form, which we've developed. There would also be a public summary of the procedures and guidelines, sort of a Q&A or a frequently asked questions. Then there's a section on request for public records, and it outlines how folks can make a request for public records. There are specific procedures for responding to a request. It's important to note, and this is not a change in the law, this is actually currently in the law, but we don't have an obligation to create a document. And I think that's important for people to know and understand that freedom of information means that if you have a document that meets this criteria that I've outlined, then you need to supply it to me. But you don't have to create a report. So if somebody asks for a summary of something and we don't have a document that meets that, then we would have to deny the request because we can't produce that document. There is a time period for responding. I don't think that changed in the law, but we at least outlined that. There are fee calculations. The legislature did make some changes and clarifications in terms of how you calculate a fee, and so that is clearly outlined. One of the things that's in gray on page 4 is the copying fees section, and we need to spend some time to determine exactly what our copying cost is, and then that is the fee that we can charge for a copy. We can't just set an arbitrary amount. So we're working on that gray section yet, and that will change between now and the next meeting to reflect our actual cost. There's a section that talks about fee deposits and how those are handled. There's a section that talks about fee waivers, and then there's a section that talks about appeals, and if you feel that the document exists or the fee was not calculated correctly, then you can appeal that. There's some miscellaneous language that just talks about effective date and repealer and that kind of stuff. So that, in a nutshell, is it. The procedures and guidelines actually have been prepared by the city attorney, and so if you have any questions for me, I may turn those over to the city attorney. But he's done a nice job, I think, of putting this together to be compliant with the changes in the law. But it also, it's a great document because it creates more transparency by letting the public know exactly what the process is for Freedom of Information Act request. And we certainly want to do the best job that we can to make sure that somebody wants something, then we make sure we supply that to them, that document. So this really clarifies that communication between us and the requester. That's in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, we'll have this ready for its final form at your next meeting.
All right. Any council comments about any questions?
Seems very comprehensive. So it looks like a good document so far.
There's no action at this time. This is for a review and organic comments, and final draft would be at our final. To take action would be at our next meeting.
At your next meeting. And if you happen to think of something between now and next meeting, or members of the public, as they're looking at this, if anybody has any questions, feel free to give me a call, and we'll make sure we produce a quality document for review for approval.
Excellent, thank you. Item C is Cascade Inspection Services Agreement.
We have been working with Cascade Township for the last 3 years to provide building inspection services. This was one of the moves we made to try to create more intergovernmental collaboration. Cascade Township has been running an inspection program for municipalities for several years, and over the last 3 years, I've received nothing but positive comments about the service. Contractors are already familiar with them. Homeowners seem to have been happy with the service that they provide. Building inspection is not always an easy job. You need to, what I always say to the inspectors though is that you need to be professional and courteous. And even sometimes when you're saying no or that somebody has to make a change, just be professional and courteous. And Cascade does just a fantastic job of that. So. This agreement would be effective July 1 if you approve it, and it would basically put us in a position where we contract with Cascade Township for another 3 years.
All right. Council comments?
No, everyone I talked to, including trades, said that they feel like we're good. And it makes it nice because they are, they're working with them in the same, basically in the same areas, so it makes it
There's consistency.
a lot consistent, more than it used to be, so.
I've heard nothing but, well, not nothing, I've heard a lot of good things about them. They're just a great set of people over there. Apparently they have one electrical inspector that is less desired, I guess. But maybe he's just doing his job, I don't know, but I know he put O'Reilly's auto parts through the mill in Dunn Fierce when they were building that. Good thing, bad thing, I don't know. But other than that, that's the only bad thing I've ever heard about the place. They do a good job.
Go on.
Do you want me to? Yeah. I'll make the motion to renew the contract for another 3 years.
I would second.
Been moved and seconded to continue our relationship with Cascade Inspection Services for another 2 years. Maybe a roll call on this.
Councilmember Alcoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ellison?
Yes.
Councilmember Hall?
Yes,
Councilmember Mayer?
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges?
Yes. Thanks. And item 8 is council comments. So we'll begin with Mr. Mayor.
Nothing yet. We won't meet until next Monday.
All right. Mr. Alton.
Graduation's over. Sharon's only has 4 more days of children. But no, traffic's starting to move a little better in town. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Hall.
all my meetings are upcoming, so I have nothing to report, but I got a brochure today that said that the concerts are getting ready to start pretty soon, so I'm hoping that that wraps up my summer and it's a good one, so. Always glad to see the concerts back in town. Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Alton.
I have upcoming meetings, but nothing to report on my boards, and I really don't have any comments.
Yes. Well, this is June 1st, so we are the first meeting of the month. Anyway, similarly, Lowell Power will meet next week, Chamber of Commerce next week. Look Memorial Fund did meet a week ago, and for their distribution of funds, they had limited funds available, but chose to give $3,600 to the library towards the HVAC system, and $3,600 to From for improving their security system. And so those are the 2 allocations that the Memorial Fund did make. At our next meeting in a closed session, we will do the annual city manager review, and so I have an evaluation form that I'll pass out to you right now, and I'd ask that you get those back to me either at City Hall or to my home next Monday. And so it gives you 1 full week. You don't want to spend too much time on it anyway. Just deal with it. Don't lose it. Don't set it aside. Might as well hit it while it's hot, and get it back to me by next Monday, and then I'll compile them and make copies available to all of you before we have that meeting in the closed session on June the 15th. So with that, we'll move on to the city manager's report. Mr. House.
A couple of things, and then I have a few add-ons to my written report. But first of all, at your next meeting, we'll be holding a truth in taxation hearing, and a notice is going to appear in the ledger on Wednesday. And the language of the notice is going to say, notice of public hearing on increasing property tax and proposed additional millage. And I think it's important for folks to know that we are not proposing a property tax increase or a millage rate increase. These hearings may be required each year based on calculations performed by Kent County Equalization. The City council has the ability to allocate up to 20 mills, but that has actually been reduced because of what's called the Hadley Amendment to the Constitution. So the council has the ability to allocate 17.4597 mills. Currently, the council has an allocated millage rate of 15.7 mills, and that's a full 10% below what you have the ability to allocate. You've done that in your budget resolution, allocated the 15.7, so that is the same as it was last year. And we'll have a resolution available for you after the public hearing in your next meeting to reaffirm that 15.7 mils. So it'll be the same millage rate as it is this year. The reason that the notice is required is that if you have, and I'm going to be very simplistic, but it's a very complicated formula that the equalization department goes through. But the basic reason why we have this to the taxation hearing is if your values exceed the rate of inflation, then you have to have a truth in taxation hearing. You can do that during the budget process with a simple note saying the millage rate needed to support this budget will be a part of the public hearing, part of that discussion. We did not include that note in our budget notice, and so that's why we have to publish a separate notice and have a separate truth in taxation hearing. I think the best way to sum it up is that and the language is the language that's required in state law. But the best way to sum it up is that you need to give notice to the public on what you have the ability to do, because you have the ability to increase the millage rate, and you have the ability to increase taxes as a part of that meeting. But that is not our intent to recommend that to you. That was not included in the budget. So I'm offering this explanation because I'm sure when the notice goes out, you're going to get a lot of phone calls. We are preparing to put something on our Facebook page. We are also preparing an explanation that we'll put on our website that would be happy to email or mail to anybody who asks. And we'll be talking with the ledger to see if they're interested in also doing a story with us. Just to make sure that people understand that we are not proposing a property tax increase or a millage rate increase. So that's that item. Hudson Street Bridge over the Grand River was closed on May 21. It was commented on previously. We were able to work with the Road Commission and MDOT to have a four-way stop installed at Jackson, Maine. That seems to have helped. And it gets really busy in the morning and really busy in the evening, but for the most part, things certainly are going much better than they were that first evening. We hope that the contractors move along, get that bridge fixed, and maybe they'll meet or beat that July 2nd deadline. I have a few photos to throw up on the screen for you on Donna Drive. Donna Drive was repaved. I apologize for the light here, but here's some photos of what it looked like before the repaving was done. And of course, we've talked about how Donna Drive was the worst street in the city. It was the worst graded street in the city. One of the things that I want to point out for you is that this is before the repaving, but water really was settling in that area, in several spots in that area, because it's a very, very flat street. It's a very, very flat and level